Thanks. It's good to be here again, and probably for the last time for a little while. So yeah, it's always a blessing to be here, though. I'd like to share a little bit about what God is doing in Greece, and then also what a little bit about DNI, Destinations International. So there's kind of two parts to what we're sharing today. I know sometimes when you're sharing about programs or mission work, it can come across as like um, kind of triumphant, and this is all the great things we're doing. But I'd like, today is Father's Day, has me thinking for everyone who's a father and actually a mother too, I'm sure. Um, my experience is that 90% of the time you're kind of feel like you're walking in the dark. You're not sure exactly what's the best route forward. Yeah, sometimes it seems like things are kind of out of control. But at the same time, you have a couple guiding principles often, you know, to be there for your kids, you often have the example of your own father, hopefully a good father, um, to go by and things like that. And so, as we're sharing today, I don't want to just come across as triumphant, but also realize that 90% of the time it feels like we're walking in the dark a little as a father does or as a mother does. But at the same time, we do have some guiding principles, and we're going to talk about some of those today. And it's only by God's grace anything that's accomplished is accomplished. So I just want to make that clear from the beginning, um, and not to make everything look extremely glamorous. This doesn't have to be super formal. If you have questions, I'm fine. If you want to just call them out or raise your hand or whatever else works. Yeah, I have some things to share, but if sometimes I forget what questions you might have, and so if you have any, don't be afraid to ask, please. Maybe I should introduce myself a little more. My name's Chad, married to Fonda, and we have two children, Jackson and Maya, 3 and 1. We've been living in Greece for about 2 years now, and Jason and Carrie are Fonda's parents, so that's our connection here. Many of you are close friends. Some of you are less. Less we have less experience with, though. So we're serving with DestiNations International. I'm going to start with a little bit about them. Here we go. The mission of DestiNations International is proclaiming the gospel and planting reproducing, mission-minded Anabaptist churches among unreached peoples. Now, there's kind of three things there. The one is reproducing. The reproducing is the idea that a church, ideally, will produce more churches. That in the same way that families grow, churches should grow. Unfortunately, many times this doesn't happen. There's lots of pressures on your own congregation. Sometimes you forget about the reproducing part. But that's the ideal: is that a church that is planted can plant another church or maybe multiple churches. And if you look at the model of how the early church spread and even how Jesus taught, he only started with the 12 disciples. I mean, obviously, more people than that were impacted by his ministry, but the core of what he did was those 12 disciples. But those 12 disciples each went to different areas and had a large impact with people, and that has continued throughout until the point we are now. When that chain breaks is when stagnation often enters the church. So reproducing, mission-minded, again, that's a little bit related to reproducing, but one of our burdens is that as people become believers, we are right away helping them to lead others to Christ. Easier said than done, but that is an important mindset that we're trying to instill. And then Anabaptist churches. And once you step outside of North America, what Anabaptism is sometimes can feel a lot different, or the pressures feel a lot different, and the community feels a lot different. And so this is not necessarily trying to reproduce exactly what's here in the States. But at the same time, we do feel like we have something to contribute from our Anabaptist background that will be valuable even in foreign fields. And so, as we teach, we recognize that it's not our church. We don't many of the churches that are planted are not necessarily directly under the control of the church planting teams as they might be in more of a conference model. But at the same time, we feel like we are blessed in our Anabaptist background and want to teach that perspective, and then leave the results to the Lord. In Revelation 7, we are told, verse 9, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one can number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands." And so this is a picture into the future of worship surrounding God's throne. And we're told that every tribe, every people, every language will be included in that. And so what the mission that we are on as DNI, as Destinations International, is simply to fulfill what God has already said will happen. And that's, in fact, all of what the kingdom of God is about. It's doing what we know will happen. And it's returning the world to what God has intended it to be, following the brokenness of sin. Destinations International has targeted primarily what is known as an unreached people group, and that is someone that is 2% or less evangelical Christian. And the idea there is that when the population or a certain group is 2% or less Christian, it's very hard for that to grow. It's very hard if you're talking about someone from Nepal, it's very hard for a Nepalese church to start to grow and thrive at under 2%. There's been people who have studied this fairly closely. Once that number is reached, then the church often has the momentum to keep growing on its own. And for that reason, Destinations International has targeted unreached people group. Now, of the people in the world, and it's a little hard to know exactly where to draw the line on language and tribe, but say, you do try to do that, draw the line on languages, people groups is the term they used, 42% of those are still considered unreached. Now, that does not mean 42% of the world's population is considered unreached, but 42% of the groups. Many of those groups would be smaller minority groups. And so this is the work that Destinations International has chosen to prioritize, recognizing that among many nations there are thriving churches that will be able to. Does not mean missions to those groups are not important, but it's not the priority of Destinations International. Also, on the flip side, there are also people groups who have been largely Christian in the past who are actually falling into the category of unreached again. Quebec in Canada would be one of those that is under 2% evangelical. A lot of European countries are very close as well. And I just want to say here from the beginning, it's only through the grace of God and prayer that any of this can happen. We can study church planning models. We can study how societies interact. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize we cannot figure this out just through our own studies and our own goal setting. And it's only through prayer and the grace of God. And so I just want to be very honest and clear about that. And Destinations International partners with Anabaptist churches to recruit, train, send, and support teams. And so DNI actually works with a lot larger than churches within their own affiliation. DNI is part of the BMA affiliation, but lots of other workers and churches have partnered with BMA or with DNI. In fact, I know this is a Anabaptist Disciples of Christ affiliated church now, if I understand right. And I know there has been a fair amount of conversation between some of the ADC leadership and DNI leadership about partnering moving forward on some ministry work. So I think there's actually a call about that this week about the possibility of partnering somewhat in Europe. So I don't know what fruit that will bring, but DNI looks at themselves as a resource for anyone who's willing to, share this vision. Talked about that already. DNI does a fair amount of recruitment events, trying to share the needs and the opportunities, and because many times, sometimes people do not receive their call or the yeah, the Spirit sometimes works through this kind of event. Um, DNI also provides training. The Mission Training Center in New York City is one of the main events in that. It's a 6-week program. Some of you may have been there already, and then there's other opportunities for training as well. Restore training is also a big part of that. I know Carrie has been involved in that in the last few years here, but that's specifically targeting teaching women how to work with women who have been through abuse and other difficult situations. Sending. If you look into Acts chapter 13, we see the motto of churches laying on hands and sending, and so that's how DNI would envision this happening generally. The local congregations are sending individuals to the field. We are sent by our home church, which is in Western Maryland, Cumberland, Maryland. But DNI would also be considered a sending agency then. And then ongoing support. And by the way, don't send us packages without talking to us. I Fonda saw this picture and said, look out, people might try to send us packages. But unfortunately, our experience with receiving packages that sometimes you have to buy the package again in customs tax. So if anyone's ever interested in sending us something, just talk to us about it, please, and we can maybe find a way not to have that happen. There are a few options like ordering something from within Europe, or sending it with someone that's traveling back and forth. But we have already received a packet of, I think there were some games and coffee, and I don't remember what all was in, and we paid very close to what everything cost, I'm sure, to receive it into the country. So take just a minute to talk about financial support, because obviously money is a big part of how our world works. So DestiNations International has subscribed to the faith missions model. If any of you are familiar with the Hudson Taylor story, he's kind of been the founder of this idea that you will go to the field and you will pray that God will supply your needs, and not necessarily have commitments or pledges for those needs, or to cover the cost of that. So as how that fleshes itself out, we put together a budget and say this is what our expenses are, our cost of living, some basic ministry stuff. Sometimes ministry is done under separate organizations, but sometimes it's more done in our family. And so whatever's done in our family, we'll put that in our budget. And then we are willing to tell people what our needs are, but we're not necessarily going around soliciting pledges, which a lot of ministries would do, would look for pledges for the full amount before someone goes to the field. God definitely works through those people as well, but in this model, we're trusting the Lord to supply those needs. Whoever chooses to contribute, whether that's churches or businesses, families, friends, they contribute through DNI, and then that's passed along to us. We are considered employees of DNI, considered self-employed. We pay taxes on what comes into our support as employees, and then we receive it at the end. And there's a monthly report we do back to DNI whether or not our budget has been met, whether it's been exceeded, whether it's been not met. And some of that's available. If you're interested, that's also available to you guys if you would like to see that. There's a little web page for each worker. DNI does set aside 2%. They add 2% in an equity fund while we are on the field. That way, sometime in the future we need to come back, there's a little bit there to start with as well. It's not like we're starting from scratch if for a few months rent and groceries, that kind of thing. So no one under DNI is salaried, including the administration. Everyone is under this same model. Ways you can partner with DNI. A big one is prayer. There's a monthly intercessors bulletin. We have prayer requests we submit every month, and then that's laid out day by day. You can pray day by day for DNI workers and needs around the world. And sometimes this ends up feeling like busy work, but I have a couple times I've gone back and said, look, we had these issues we prayed for. These issues went away. When did they go away? and a high percentage of the time they went away within a day or two of when those prayer requests are on the schedule to be prayed for. And so sometimes we kind of don't think about the actual results of prayer, but it was encouraging just to see that. So if anyone wants to sign up for that, I can get you hooked up with that. Just let me know. Comes out by email. There's a every year there's Unite. It's a prayer event, one night. It's like a 4 or 5 hour marathon. If anyone's into prayer marathons, that's a kind of a fun event. And then there are stories to encourage your faith. There's actually a number of these on the table back there. You're welcome to grab them. Basically, they're stories about answered prayer. So keep everyone encouraged. Encouragement is a big part of supporting people. Many of y'all know about that. We have been encouraged by many of y'all as we're in the field. So yeah, we appreciate that. DestiNations International has a new initiative right now called Destination Generation. And the idea is that most teams would have a large benefit from having a grandfather, grandmother figure join the team. And so they're trying to create the space to do that and are actively recruiting. So if there's anyone here that feels that in their future, get in touch with D&I. The idea is that as people 50 and over who have raised families, who have had some life experience, many of the workers on the field are quite young, like ourselves. But then also recognizing that someone in this stage of life may have a little different needs. They may want to have a little more freedom to visit grandchildren in other parts of the world, and so also creating the space for that to happen. Maybe spending 6 months or 9 months out of a year in the field, but then 3 or 4 or 5 months out of the year in the States, that kind of thing. So just an idea for any of y'all or your family members if there's interest in something like that. So where are D&I teams serving? I'll just do a quick rundown of some of the teams, and then we'll move on a little more specifically to the Greece team. But there's usually 2 places. One is among unreached peoples generally in the 1040 window, kind of surrounding the equator, and then also in cities where many of these people have migrated to. So North America and Europe, European cities also would have large populations of some of these unreached people groups. There's a team in Cambodia. They have English classes, and I'm not sure of their full program, but they have a number of things going there. Southeast Asia, this is the country of Myanmar, and you can pray for this team. There's been quite a bit of political unrest. There was a coup a few years ago, and a lot of protesting and deaths on the street, that kind of thing. And they're kind of there alone, so pray for them. Southeast Asia refugees, this would be the Rohingya refugees living in Bangladesh. And actually, we have Zach's parents here today, so welcome. Happy to have you all here. But they're working there they have, I think, coffee shop, and there's a clinic there as well, run by Christian Aid Ministries that they're partnering with. And then there's also a team in Dhaka in Bangladesh, the main city there. I'm not exactly sure what their work entails, other than I know the one is working in linguistics there. This Middle Eastern team is pretty new, just launched last year. It is in northern Iraq, Kurdistan area, and they are kind of taking over the work that Christian Aid Ministries has been doing there, the aid work, the medical work, and transitioning that a little more into church planting instead of solely aid. CAM felt like it was at the point where they needed someone to focus a little more on church planting. There is a team forming for Thailand. It has not yet formed, and so no one is on the ground there yet, but hopefully in the future. 2 teams working together there in 2 locations in Mongolia. I guess Mongolia is not technically China, but it's kind of a satellite country of China. But to the north of China, they're quite cold. They're doing a lot of ice skating ministry, like sports, hockey. I don't know how it all works, but I know they're doing a lot with the youth through hockey. and some farming initiatives and English, I think, as well, teaching English. And then in New York City, there is a team working with Turkish people. Um, I don't know if any of you have heard about Shepherd's Cup, the coffee shop that's opened up there a few years ago, but a lot of their work is centered around that recently. And then our team in Greece, we are blessed to have Daniel and Amber Miller joining us. Amber's from the Lancaster area. Daniel is from Toronto, and actually his parents are still there. You'll see their picture in just a minute here, working with DNI. There's a team in New York City working with the Jewish people. Very difficult ministry, very, very closed to Christian influence, but they have committed themselves to working in that sphere, so God bless them. I don't know if any of you have been to parts of Brooklyn and New York City there where it's a different world. Everyone looks at you funny because you're not Jewish. There's a team in Toronto. This is Daniel's parents working among First Nations people. They have a little restaurant there serving. I'm not actually sure what all foods it is, but it's indigenous First Nations type food. So this is a fairly new team that's gone to Quebec. Like I said, Quebec is actually considered unreached now, less than 2% evangelical, but with a very strong Catholic background. The Ministry Training Center is in New York City. This is a training facility. There's a lot of cross-cultural ministry training going on. This is located in Elmhurst, New York, which is considered one of the most diverse neighborhoods in North America. I don't remember the stats on it, but within a couple square miles, you have actually the majority of nations represented. There's a team in Spain working with migrants coming from North Africa to work in the agriculture industry. A lot of Moroccans and other Arabic speakers. And then we have an admin team. Henry Blank's the president of DNI. Ian Miller is the assistant administrator, and then we have some support to them, and then also a supporting team working more with the people in the field. Many of you all have known or heard of Alan Roth. He's kind of the founder of DestiNations International. It was originally his vision for BMA to start doing international mission work. So he was the president for a number of years, but now is in more of a support role as they are aging. He does a lot of traveling, teaching, and encouraging, and lots of many people respect his wisdom and passion for church planting, even as he got to be approaching 70, and he's learning French and Bengali. Working hard every day, learning languages even at 70, so he's amazing. So I'd like to take a little time now talking a little more about the work in Greece, a little more details, specifics. We've had a lot of transition, and so we're going to do a couple things. We're going to look back, first of all, at the first, last year and a half, 2 years, and then we're going to look at now, what's happening now in the next year or so, and then we're going to look into the future a little, at least try to, and think about what the future may hold as work in Greece. The one thing that is most constant in Greece is change, we're finding. And so as we look at the future, we do that very humbly, knowing we can't tell you what's going to happen. We spent a lot of the last year doing language classes, English classes with refugees, using some very hands-on ways of teaching, not using textbooks, not reading and writing, but only spoken. One reason is there's actually a lot of refugees who aren't literate in their first language, and so to try to teach with a textbook is pointless. And the other reason, as they are in transition and there's a lot of mental noise through all of that, the more hands-on and concrete we can make classes, the more they can absorb them. When things become abstract, a mind that is not stable or not in a stable situation has a really hard time learning. Greece is a hot spot for a lot of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. So Fonda and there's a team of girls partnering with Damaris House that has done quite a bit of work in some of the brothels and other places in Athens in the last year. Um, I guess she just took my out. I was going to have her tell a little more about that, but um, so you continue to pray for that. Has a very dark side to the city. Lots of tourists walk through this beautiful parts of the city and don't kind of, you don't see what's on the other side of the street sometimes. But there's a very dark side to Athens as well. Spent a lot of time in refugee camps and different apartments around the city where refugees are housed, with gifts, with sometimes with food bags, but also just building relationships, sharing the gospel. Sometimes having Bible studies with people, with a lot of Afghans and Iranians. Now, a lot of these people have grown up in Afghanistan and Iran, where there are no Christians, at least not public ones. There are Christians there, but if they want to know anything about Christianity, it's very difficult for them to find anything out. You have to kind of be in the network to find the Christians, which is for safety reasons. But many people, when they come out, they're like, we're good Muslims, but we're kind of curious. Like, what is this Christianity thing? And so many of them will be open to, at least hearing some Christians talk. I don't think we realize what it's like to grow up in an area where everyone is saying the same thing regarding religion. Everyone. In fact, my teacher, and as an example of this, my Farsi teacher, my Dari teacher in Afghanistan, he told me the other day, he wasn't telling me, but he was giving me an example sentence that I was learning. But he said, only in Afghanistan are there people who are truly following God. All the other countries have infidels. Only here do we have people that are truly following God. It's like, I've never had that mindset. But if that's the mindset you grow up with, suddenly you're outside of that. It's like a whole new world has opened up to these people. And many of them don't embrace it. The percentage of refugees who become Christians is less than half. But it's still a significant majority are at least open to learning more because they never had that opportunity before. They didn't have access to Bibles. They never talked to a Christian. Many people never saw a Christian before, at least not that I know of. And so, thankfully, we have the opportunity to change that. Food is a really big deal to Middle Eastern cultures. Actually, it is to all cultures, right? But so lots of times around meals. And then with those that have become believers, we had a lot of fun having lots of kebab parties on Eric's deck over the last year. If you ever get a chance to eat Afghan kebabs, please do. You will not regret it. Oh, I take that back. The chicken kebabs here, those are amazing. They do have one kebab that they fed us where they put chunks of liver on a skewer. They do about 3 chunks of liver, and then they do a chunk of fat. 3 chunks of liver, chunk of fat, and they grill that. That one was a little interesting, but I liked all the rest. We've had a number of opportunities to have conferences or services, Farsi services. There was a Farsi worship that we helped organize for about a year. Unfortunately, that shut down because everyone that was a part of it left. But we'll talk about that a little more. And then also spent quite a bit of time learning Dari. We are learning the Afghan dialect of Farsi, which is called Dari. So I have a teacher in Afghanistan that we do Zoom calls about 4 hours a week is what we were targeting. I was targeting. Unfortunately, because we're not super immersed in it, obviously Greeks speak the Greek language, so it's a little hard to find good opportunities to practice outside of class time. Lots of people say, so how well can you speak the language? Well, greetings, talking about family, that kind of stuff is getting fairly easy. But then if you start getting into more higher level things like religion or, faith or more abstract things that aren't just the concrete things you can look around, that's still fairly difficult for me. And then I can also understand a lot more than I can articulate at this point. So Lord willing, that will continue to change. I would love to be able to teach the Bible in Dari someday, and so that's my prayer that I can get there. It looks a little difficult at this point without truly being immersed in the language, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, we were able to have witness and be a part of a few baptisms in the GNC, and this is it's a sweet time, but it's also a little bittersweet because many of these people have within a few months left, and we have very little contact with them. And so, obviously that's not ideal. When you baptize someone, you want to be able to also continue to walk with them for a long time in their faith. So it's one of the challenges of living in Greece. Many people are there for about 3 months, and then move on to other countries, mainly Western Europe, Germany and Switzerland, and England is common as well. We've had lots of Christmas parties. Again, Christmas is something many people, many of the refugees were never allowed to celebrate before, and so it's an opportunity to teach them all about Santa Claus and Christmas trees. No, just kidding. It's an opportunity to teach them about the true meaning of Christmas. They actually are familiar with that part pretty well. They see it online and on TV and that kind of thing. But the opportunity to teach them about the true meaning of Christmas. Think a little more of our family. We've enjoyed lots of trips to the mountains in Greece. Greece is actually, it's mountains and sea. That's about all it is. There's very little plains. There is one there that Athens is kind of in, but it's also running up the sides of the mountains a little bit. So we are blessed to be able to get out of the city and experience nature pretty easily as well. And then surrounded by beautiful sea. So, the water's quite warm usually over the summer, and there's lots of opportunity to be in it if you wish. So we're really blessed by that. We are in pretty close connection with the folks in Lesvos, so we get out there a few times a year. We have good friends out there, and we actually are formally working together with I-58 now. Talk a little bit about that more in a bit. We are there working mainly with Afghans and Iranians, but we also get to experience Greek culture, and one of the favorite things of that is just the open-air markets they have every week with lots of delicious fruits and vegetables and olives, if you like those, and fish, fresh fish, and really appreciate the cheap food that is. Cheap and delicious. Able to spend time with our parents the last year. Both our parents visited. I'm sorry, Jason and Carrie, I did not get your picture up here. This morning I suddenly panicked that I hadn't put one up of you, but I didn't have time. So they do? Okay. They came to see us, and we were blessed by it. But then there's been a lot of changes. Lots of goodbyes. Actually, let me back up a little. This is our team this was about, oh man, I'm going to have a hard time saying when, about a year apart, a little over a year apart. And as you can see, the number of children have increased quite a bit for everyone. So that was the one significant change. We also had lots of goodbyes. Nearly all the Afghan and Iranian refugees we were working with have left Greece. That we worked with for the first year have left Greece. Some have gone to Germany, some have gone to Switzerland, some have gone to Canada. Many of them, some of them we know are connected with churches where they have gone, but some we don't have a whole lot of communication with anymore, and so we can only pray that they can remain faithful and continue following God. But it does make it a little difficult when all the relationships you are establishing get broken about every 3 months. And so we have, as a family, we found out we have to actually establish relationships with people who will be around for the long term as well. And so many of those have been Greeks. There's a Greek church that we've been attending at fairly often. One of the reasons is we need to have a relationship with someone who's going to be here more than 3 months, because even our own team, we're bound by visas. You never know if you're going to get your next visa and that type of thing. So for the Greeks that have grown up there, the majority of them are going to be there their entire lives. The other change that has happened with the refugees, and this is more of a political thing, that many of the refugees are now being kept in camps their whole until they have full acceptance. Whereas in the past, after their the first step in the asylum process, they were allowed to leave the camp. Now, if they leave the camp, their asylum process will shut down, and so they basically have to stay at the camp much longer, which means there are fewer refugees on the streets. When you go downtown Athens, there was a park that used to be packed with them in the summer. Now is a lot emptier. They're still there, but the numbers are a lot less, which means some of the work we have to do has to shift a little. We've had team changes. As some of you may know, Eric and Kate were our team leaders. They have left the team, the D&I team, and are now working independently for various reasons, but that obviously has had a fairly large impact on our day-to-day operations. We've had family changes. Maya was born a little over a year ago in our little apartment there in Athens, so that was exciting and a blessing, and also had a lot of change, as you know, when a child arrives. We had a change of our housing. We went from we were living in an apartment kind of in the center of the city, pretty small apartment with very little outdoor space. We had like a balcony that was about as wide as this pulpit running around the outside of the house. And God blessed us with a house a little more out of the center of the city, and we actually have a yard. It was in pretty rough shape. We've gotten a little better, but we do have space where we can be outside and the children have a little more space to play. And that's been a huge blessing. We've had changes in the weather. Greece is usually pretty hot and mild, but we did get snow both winters we've been there. It's lasted about a day, and the temperatures are usually hanging right around freezing, but we did get to enjoy that for a little bit. So I'd like to look a little bit at the now. Like, what are we doing? Like this year, the next 6 months to a year. What have we been doing? Will we continue to be doing when we go back? Just give you a little glimpse into that. The one main thing is we have began working with a lot more partners, a lot more other organizations. Obviously, we are sent by D&I, but we're also considered I-58 workers now. D&I is a little more in a sending role, a supporting role. I-58 is a little more involved in the day-to-day stuff on the ground, so that actually has worked out quite well. With D&I, we have reports and accountability kind of on a quarterly basis, whereas with I-58, it's weekly. And then a lot of what I-58 is doing is actually under the umbrella of Hellenic Ministries, which is a large evangelical organization there in Greece. And so because of the complexity of Greek law, they are actually the name on a lot of the legal documents. And so we're also working with some of their programs, supporting and doing programs under Hellenic Ministries. And a lot of the work we are doing, especially since the major team change at the end of last year, has been supporting indigenous leaders. And by that, I mean refugees who have decided to settle in Greece and are actually working in a ministry context. They've become believers. They want to reach their own people. And so, as you know, our role is often a little more in a support role to them. Maybe it's helping them with the administrative side of stuff, since they are able to communicate better the gospel than us. We can help them with the administrative end of things, so that they are free to do that more. Also ends up being a fair amount of like cultural interpretation, you might say, between Greeks and Afghans and Americans, just trying to make those relationships go well, because it's very easy for misunderstandings and hard feelings to crop up quite quickly in a situation where so many nations are coming together. We do not have all the cultures figured out, but we try to play that middleman and be learners. Kind of two programs we're working on. One is there is a Bible study, a weekly Bible study program that's happening. It's called Discipleship Training Center. It's in Farsi, but we are kind of helping supplement that. Well, one, we're helping the leader of that as an indigenous leader. We're supporting him, but then also trying to bring a hands-on dimension to that. So many refugees come to Greece. They get in lots and lots of Bible studies. They study the Word, study the Word, study the Word. But one of their greatest needs is actually community and fellowship, where they can see this fleshed out. And so it's really our burden is to be able to provide this in Greece. Um, Ways to work together on projects. Maybe that's actually like physical projects, like cleaning up ministry centers together, or cleaning up trash in the park, or even just going up to the mountains together and going hiking. Things like that, where when someone, when relationship problems happen, they can actually see brotherly love in action rather than just reading about it in the Bible. We all know the Bible's a great resource, but the reality is head knowledge does very little for us. What really empowers us to follow Jesus is actually walking with others that are following Jesus. It's a big part of discipleship. There's also a campground called Porto Astro. It means port of the star or guiding star, something like that. That is available a lot of weekends out of the year. In the winter especially is not in use, and so that is available to us to use. We haven't been using it a whole lot outside of the normal summer camps that we have helped with. That's a Hellenic Ministries program, though. And so we would really love to see small groups going up there regularly to kind of just live together sometimes and have the opportunity to get a little mad at each other and then work that out. And in case you're not noticing, conflict resolution is kind of a big need. And Christian, working through problems in a brotherly Christian way is not a skill that many people come with from Afghan and Iranian cultures. In fact, there's often long-standing kind of grudges among tribes and people groups. The other main program we're working with is called Axiom Media, and it's a media studio there that is producing resources to share the gospel, again, mostly Iranian and Afghan. There's a program for radio that's being recorded right now that's hopefully going to start broadcasting here in July in Afghanistan. So that's pretty exciting. There's also testimonies that they are recording and publishing on social media and some other channels. And then we're also hoping to start, and this is more of an I-58 project, but working with Axiom Media, we would like to start doing a lot more social media work to find seekers, people in Athens and the surrounding areas who are interested in the gospel. Because you can go to the park, you can talk to people. There's actually a lot of people doing that, a lot of Christians doing that already. But when you go to the park, many people are sitting there hunched over their smartphones, scrolling through Facebook or something else. And so anymore, it's a little difficult to get face-to-face conversations. And then the other benefit of media is that if they are in a situation where there's a lot of pressure from other Muslims not to be involved with Christians, it's a little more private, something they can do and hide it a lot easier. So pray for that. We're excited to kind of dive back into that later this year and see what becomes of it, see what the Lord does with that. We will go back here in 2 weeks, and we're going to be applying for a new visa platform. Lord willing, we'll be able to get what's called a digital nomad visa. It's a new option that's opened up in Greece. We'll be working as DNI employees. DNI is an American-based company, but we will be working in a foreign country, which makes you a digital nomad because you work on computers mostly, right? The biggest challenge to this is that they do require $68,000 a year as a salary, which is significantly above what we need. So we are working on a way to get that, receive that, but then also put that back into some ministry work. So sometimes we have to get a little creative to have legal platforms to work off of in some countries, including Greece. Any questions so far? Is there anything that's kind of like I'm not making very clear? Oh, if not, so what does the future look like? Only God knows, but we have some ideas, or some, maybe I should even say burdens, some things we'd be excited about in the future. We have a burden, especially for the Afghan people. This has one of the largest unreached people groups with the smallest percentages of Christians. But at the same time, and I've talked about this here before, it's actually a quickly growing church. That has some real challenges to it, though. One is with quickly growing churches, there's very little biblical knowledge and understanding. There's many people are becoming Christians inside Afghanistan and have no access to scriptures, or maybe they have just little bits of scriptures. It's a big challenge. Specifically in Europe, many people, many Afghan refugees are coming to Europe, but at this point in Greece, they're very transient. It's rare that they're staying beyond 3 months, especially Afghans. There's a few Iranians who have chosen to stay in Greece, but not many. As they go out, they become very scattered. They go into Western Europe. If they go to Germany, which is the goal of many people, Germany is very intentional about scattering the refugees thinly. They don't want pockets of radical Islam cropping up, which is becoming a problem in some European countries. And so it means if there is an Afghan Christian that goes to Germany, the chances of them getting placed near another Afghan Christian are very, very slim. And so how do you support faith when that's the reality? The other challenge with this is you have Afghans coming to Europe. The mom and dad speak Dari. They will probably learn a little German, say they settle in Germany. They'll probably learn to, get along, shop, buy what they need, hopefully have a job. But they're still going to consider themselves Afghan, right? They're Afghans. We just happen to be in Germany. However, quickly, the next generation, that identity starts to change. They will have much more of a public-private identity. Their public identity will probably be German. It's only when they go back home that they can really think about themselves as Afghan. So as you plant a church among that and hope to see church communities rise, you also have to be thinking about the next generation and how if you have only an Afghan church, very quickly the next generation is probably going to be leaving that, either to the world or hopefully to a German church or something local there. The other challenge is that this is a new area of ministry for many people. A lot of the mission work that has been done over the last century has been targeting, the village in Afghanistan rather than the Afghans spread across Europe. And so there is very little resources that have been produced or written, or, not many people have walked this path of kind of church planting among scattered peoples like this. So again, another challenge. We would envision, ideally, a network of churches or /cell groups of believers, but attached closely to churches in their home country that they choose to settle in. So if they're settling in Germany, whatever is growing up is going to have to be attached to a German church to be healthy, in our opinion. Not quite sure what that looks like. Again, it's a bit of a new phenomenon, especially this thinly scattered. How do we teach them to find a good church, German church? Faith in Europe is not necessarily very strong. There's a lot of very secular, almost, churches out there. So I don't know that we have answers for this. We pray that this can happen, though. That there can be pockets of faith that grow up in Europe that are also, well connected with local churches, whatever that looks like. We pray. We know God has miraculous ways of doing this. So this is our prayer. And I'd just like to look a little bit at Psalm 124. Because this is really our experience, our prayer in this whole thing. It feels like, in a lot of ways, if you look at someone becoming a believer, an Afghan Iranian becoming a believer in this context, it feels like there's a lot going wrong for them, actually. Like there's a lot of hurdles for them to remain faithful. And so Psalm 124 says, "If the Lord had not been on our side," let Israel say this, "if the Lord had not been on our side when men attacked us, they would have swallowed us alive. When their anger raged against us." If you look at the persecution from other Muslims, you look at the secularism in Europe, you look at materialism that creeps in very quickly in Western context, it's like, how does someone survive in this? It's only if the Lord is on their side. The waters would have overpowered us, the currents would have overwhelmed us, the raging water would have overwhelmed us. The Lord deserves praise, for he did not hand us over as prey to their teeth. There is faith flourishing in Europe among these peoples, in spite of all these obstacles. And the Lord deserves praise for this because, as he said, there will be people from every tribe and nation and language in gathered around the throne someday. Um, the zeal of the Lord will accomplish this, we're told when speaking about Christ. Hundreds of years before Christ came, through prophet Isaiah, he says, the zeal of the Lord will accomplish this. And so we see this happening today. In some ways, it looks overwhelming, but at the same time, it's unstoppable. You actually can't, this won't not happen. We escaped with our lives like a bird from a hunter's snare. The snare broke and we escaped. Our deliverer is the Lord, the creator of heaven and earth. And I would say, even on a personal level, the challenges of living across seas with lots of change, some days it feels like the water's about to overwhelm us too. And so, if the Lord had not been on our side, we actually would have been back in the States already and said, we can't do it. And so every month we stay there, it's because the Lord's on our side. And maybe someday he'll call us back. That's fine. But we're open to that. We're open to be wherever the Lord wants us to be. And we're open to wherever it makes the most sense to support this ministry to Afghans, whether that's in Greece or maybe sometime in another European country or in the States. There's actually quite a few Afghans in the States now too. So that's our prayers that this faith can grow among these special people. We know the whole refugee crisis, immigrant question politically is it's actually very difficult. What do you do with that? Nations obviously don't want radical Islam cropping up in their countries. I don't know that I have political answers to that, but we do have one answer, and that is as people turn their hearts to the Lord and follow him, problems go away. And there's peace that's the result of that. And so that's the one answer that we can pursue 100% without any kind of apology. So, any other questions? I think that's all I have to share. There's a little display back there about D&I. We are working with I-58. I don't have displays for them. I apologize. D&I bought our tickets to come here, so they get the display. If you want to take any flyers or booklets, you're welcome to anything back there. There's a prayer poster with pictures of all the workers. I actually have multiple of them. If anyone as a family likes to do prayer for missionaries or anything like that, there's a tube of them. I'll set them up where you can see them, but there's a tube of those as well. If you're interested, you're welcome to those. We appreciate your prayers or support. We know many of you message us. And outside of our family, they message us a lot, but some of the rest of you do too. We appreciate it. We know there's been financial support coming from you all. We appreciate that. We pray that we can use it well. And look forward to seeing any of you that are willing or able or interested in coming to visit us someday. So.